CBS News chief foreign affairs correspondent and Face the Nation moderator Margaret Brennan joins us now with more. Margaret, I understand you have some new reporting.
Well, we saw this extraordinary move by the International Criminal Court today to issue an arrest warrant for the very top of the Russian government, Vladimir Putin himself, for his direct role in this war crime of moving civilians forcibly, specifically here children. And so this is really extraordinary to see that The Hague go to this extent. But to be clear, this does not mean that Vladimir Putin is going to be out of power, extradited, or even indicted anytime soon. But there is a warrant out for his arrest, along with the woman who runs this program that takes Ukrainian children, about 6,000 of them, according to U.S. estimates, and has moved them into at least 43 different camps scattered across Ukrainian territory that Russia claims and within Russia itself. In the view of the State Department, which, by the way, the U.S. isn't party to this International Criminal Court, but the U.S. government argues that this is really about destroying Ukraine's identity by going after the next generation. And that is why it's a crime of this highest level.
So how enforceable is an arrest warrant for war crimes, especially in this case of Putin?
This is where it gets sticky because the International Criminal Court, you have to agree to be a member. The United States isn't. Russia isn't, India isn't, a few other countries. So for Vladimir Putin, it does create issues for travel for him. He won't be extradited. He's still firmly in control of the country. But, for example, it may be a debate now whether he attends that upcoming G20 summit in India. India is not a member. It could allow him to come. Is it a good look for them to allow him to travel? But it starts to really create more pressure on Vladimir Putin himself. And what is so interesting here is we really are living through this extraordinary moment of a sitting leader having this warrant issued. And when we are talking about the level of crime here, you hear U.S. officials, they certainly tell me they're gathering evidence of the potential of genocide. And I do think, that word gets thrown around, but that is breathtaking to think. That's the scale of what's happening.
The scope is incredible. Do you feel, Margaret, that really this development is like putting down a marker for the international community, that this is really the beginning of the evidence trail that they're building to bring additional crimes against him, as you just mentioned, possibly genocide?
Potentially, yes. And this is a marker. And the fact that, as one U.S. official pointed out to me, they didn't wait and gradually build towards the leader of the country. They went straight at Vladimir Putin, went to the top and to the person running this alongside him with this charge, suggests that it is laying the groundwork for future charges, something like crimes against humanity, which the U.S. has already said he's guilty of legally. But again, to actually face trial at The Hague sometime theoretically in the future, they would need to bring these kind of charges into an indictment.
So what does this mean in terms of his global standing? And does this have the effect potentially of Putin becoming even more entrenched and more committed to the taking and the destruction of Ukraine?
This is what we're sort of testing once again, is does the international system and these markers laid down, what do they mean? And who's going to enforce them? And one big test is just going to be in the next few days. Xi Jinping arguably is supposed to be going to Moscow. Does he go and stand beside Vladimir Putin and shake his hand in front of the cameras of the world?
What's your bet? I think he goes.
He very well may, and this is U.S. officials were talking about this. Does he go ahead with it? Does he just want to stick his finger in the eye of the West and say, I got this, your world order doesn't count, I'm writing the rules of the road now? Or does he pull back there? Because China does want to be part of this international system and an international player. So it's an interesting sort of test case here. But on paper, Russia and China have only grown closer in trade ties.
Excellent point, yeah.
And so when
the war's kind of brought them together. They used to be sort of more enemies, but now they've found a way to build a greater partnership, which is, as you know, deeply concerning to the U.S.
That's right. And when you hear the U.S. say, we don't want a new Cold War, well, you're watching these alignments happen, and that question of where does this go next? Now, the White House, interestingly, said today they did see evidence of Chinese companies having sold rifles to Russia, but then said that line hadn't been crossed in terms of lethal support for the battlefield. And that's that one thing that the United States is saying You know, is there any limit on this no limits partnership, and what lines are they going to cross next?
Margaret Brennan, thank you for your analysis.